Hello guys, welcome to Concentrate Academy. In this video, I'm going to show you how to solve quadratic equations by the method of completing the squares. So let's get straight into it. The method of completing the squares is usually used in solving quadratic equations which you could not use factorization or the quadratic formula to solve. Now, we are going to see this by taking some examples. Our quadratic equation is usually of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals to 0. Now it is quadratic because x has a power of 2 and the coefficient of x squared is a and the coefficient of x is b, and we have c, which is our constant term. Now, example 1. We have x squared plus 4x minus 4 equals to 0. If we were to use the quadratic formula to solve this, what we would have done is to multiply the coefficient of x squared, which is 1, by the constant term, negative 4, and find out two numbers which multiply to give us negative 4 and add to give us the coefficient of x, which is 4. Now we have 1 minus 1 minus 4, which gives us negative 4, but when you add it, it is negative 3. It is not equal to 4, so it can be 1 negative 4. We also have minus 1, 4. Minus 1 times 4 gives us negative 4, but minus 1 plus 4 gives us positive 3, which is still not equal to 4, so we can't use these. Now, the last we could use is 2, negative 2. 2 negative 2 gives us minus 4. However, 2 negative 2, 0, which is not equal to 4, and hence we need to introduce the method of completing the square. So the first thing we are going to do is to take the coefficient of x, which is 4. So let me rewrite it out. X squared plus 4x minus 4 equal to 0. X squared plus 4x minus 4 equal to 0. Now, what happens? So what we are going to do, we are going to move the constant to the right side of the equation. Now, since the constant term is negative 4, when you move it to the right-hand side of the equation, it becomes positive 4 and vice versa. So we now have x squared plus 4x equals 4. Take note, assuming your quadratic equation was given to you in this form, now I'm going to just do it on the side and wipe it off. X squared plus 4x minus 4 equals minus 3. To write out your quadratic equation, we equate everything to 0. Hence, you will need to transfer this to the left-hand side of the equation and now have x squared plus 4x minus 4 positive 3, since it is crossing over, and so it will change signs because it's negative 3, so it becomes positive 3 equals to 0. So we now have x squared plus 4x minus 1 equal to 0. So this is now our actual quadratic equation, and if you were going to continue it like how I'm doing it, you move the 1 to the negative side. Does that make sense? Either ways, you could have also just moved this minus 4 straight here and it becomes 1. Very easy. So now we take our coefficient of x, which is 4, and we divide it by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. And we square it. Now after squaring it, you add it to both the left-hand side of the equation and the right-hand side of the equation. So we now have x squared plus 4x plus, I usually like to maintain this 2 squared as it is. So 2 squared equals 4 plus 2 squared. Now take notice that we are only introducing this to make the solution easier, because adding 2 squared to the left hand side and adding 2 squared to the right hand side basically cancels out. So we haven't really changed the equation that much. Now, when you have this, you have a perfect square trinomial. A perfect square trinomial is usually written from a squared binomial. Now, what do I mean by a squared binomial? If you have x plus 2 all squared, the binomial term is x plus 2 and it being squared. And you know, when we rewrite this, we have x plus 2, x plus 2. You take the first value of x, multiply it by the entire second term, which is x plus 2. Then you bring the sign over here with this 2 multiplying the entire term, x plus 2. So we have x squared plus 2x plus 2x plus 4. So x squared plus 4x plus 4 is our perfect squared trinomial. And x plus 2 all squared is our squared binomial. So introducing this 2 squared to this left hand side makes this whole thing a perfect squared trinomial. Now, the main reason why I always like to keep this 2 squared over here instead of writing it out as 4 is because it makes it very easy to get the squared binomial. Now, it's quite coincidental that x squared plus this example that I used to explain perfect square trinomial and perfect and square binomial is quite similar to the left hand side. It works for other numbers that you could have. So to write it out as the square binomial, all you need to do is to take this x squared and this 2 squared and write it out as x with the sign over here, the sign which is in front of the x term. Then you bring your 2 all squared equals 4 plus 4. Now, as I explained over here, when you expand x plus 2 all squared, you get x squared plus 4x plus 4. So this didn't magically disappear. It is actually found in this and it's all on the left hand side. So then we have x plus 2 all squared equals 8. Now we need to get rid of the squared, so we take the square root on both sides and we have plus or minus square root of 8. So we have x plus 2 equals plus or minus square root of 8. Now it's plus or minus square root of 8 because it's a quadratic equation, so there's going to be 2 values of x. So x plus 2 is equal to plus or minus 2 root 2. So your first solution is x plus 2 is equal to positive 2 root 2. X is equal to 2 root 2 minus 2. Your second value of x, so let's just call our first value x1. Your second value, x plus 2 is equal to negative 2 root 2. So x2 equals negative 2 root 2 minus 2. And that's the final answer. Let's take a second example. Example 2. 4x squared plus 8x minus 4 equals to 0. Now, anytime that you have an equation whereby you can cancel out some of the factors, it is advisable to do so and cancel out some of the factors. Over here, we can cancel out by dividing everything by 4 and have x squared plus 2x minus 1 equal to 0. So now what do? We move the negative 1 to the right hand side of the equation. So we have x squared plus 2x equals 1. Take the coefficient of x divided by 2. So 2 divided by 2, which is 1, and we square it. After squaring it, you add it to the left hand side and the right hand side. So x squared plus 2x plus 1 squared equals 1 plus 1 all squared. Now to write out our squared binomial, because this is a perfect square trinomial, we have x plus 1 all squared equals 1 plus 1, which is 2. So we have x plus 1 all squared equal to 2. We take the square on both sides and the square cancels the square root, and we have plus or minus square root of 2. So we have x plus 1 equals plus or minus square root of 2. So we have two solutions. X plus 1 equals root 2. X equals root 2 minus 1. Now our second solution is x plus 1 equals minus root 2. X equals minus root 2 minus 1. And that's our final answer. Now guys, one thing I want you to take note of is that in the two examples that I've given you, the coefficient of x squared is always 1. Now, I want us to look at an example whereby the coefficient of x squared isn't 1. Because if the coefficient of x squared isn't 1, you may need to do a bit of factorization before finally using the method of completing the square. So let's take a third and final example, and I'll bring this tutorial to an end. Example 3. 2x squared plus 2x minus 5 equal to 0. In this example, our coefficient of x squared is what? 2. So let's do the needful by moving the constant term to the right hand side. So we have 2x squared plus 2x equals 5. Now we can factorize. Factorizing with the constant term outside, which is 2, we now have x squared plus x equals 5. So now we have our coefficient of x squared, which is inside the bracket with a value of 1. Now what is the coefficient of the x term? 1. So you divide 1 by 2 and you square the results. Now we're going to add it to the left hand side and the right hand side, but at the left hand side we are adding it inside the bracket. So 2, so let me use the bracket. We have x squared plus x plus 1 out of 2 all squared equals 5 plus 1 out of 2 all squared. And one final thing, remember I told you that whatever you do to the left hand side, you do to the right hand side. Now, apart from adding 1 out of 2 all squared to the left hand side, it is now being multiplied by 2 because you put it in the bracket and not outside the bracket. If it was outside the bracket, it would have just been 1 out of 2 squared. But since it's in the bracket, it is also being multiplied by these 2, and hence you multiply with 2. Now we have our perfect squared trinomial inside this bracket, which can also be written as a squared binomial. And I showed you how to easily write a squared binomial. Yes, you got it right. We have 2 in our bracket, x plus 1 over 2 all squared. X plus 1 out of 2 all squared equals 5 plus 1 out of 4 times 2. So rewriting this gives us 2 plus 1 out of 2. So we now have 2 into brackets x plus 1 out of 2 all squared equals, so we need to write this out. We need to properly expand this. So all you just need to do is to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 2. And you now have 2 into brackets x plus 1 out of 2 all squared, giving us 11 out of 2. X plus 1 out of 2 all squared gives us, now we are dividing both sides by 2. So let me properly write it out. And this one cancels out, and dividing it by 2 makes it the reciprocal. So we now have x plus 1 out of 2 all squared is equal to 11 out of 2 times 1 out of 2, which is now 11 out of 4. X plus 1 out of 2 all squared equals 11 out of 4. Taking square roots on both sides gives us square roots plus or minus square root of 11 out of 4. This square root cancels the squared, and we have x plus 1 out of 2 equals plus or minus square root of 11 out of 4. So x plus 1 out of 2 is equal to square root of 11 positive or negative square root of 11 divided by 2. So these our two solutions are going to be x plus 1 out of 2 equals positive square root of 11 divided by 2. And our second solution is going to be x plus 1 out of 2 equals negative square root of 11 divided by 2. So x equals square root of 11 divided by 2 minus 1 out of 2. Or x equals minus square root of 11 out of 2 minus 1 out of 2. And that's our final answer. Try the following examples and let me know your answers in the comment section. If you like this video, kindly leave me a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that anytime I upload a new video, you'll be notified. I love you very much, and I'll see you again in my next tutorial. Bye bye.